Welcome to the Lighthouse Financial Advisors Money Over 50 podcast with Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Lighthouse Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50. Continuing on with our real life case studies today. So, Dallas, you have some clients.
Once again, John and Jane Smith.
John and Jane. I was going to call them John and Jane Jones, but
no, I'll get confused if we.
John and Jane Smith.
Yeah,
it's we didn't even have to change their name again. All jokes aside, obviously we have changed the names of these people. So, look, tell us about John and Jane and explain the background to their scenario.
So they first came and met with me in March of 2016. Was their first meeting. They had so they're both working as employees. He was working in the construction industry and on a really high income. And so, but it's obviously in that industry can be a bit hit and miss at times, that he'd been on lower incomes, higher incomes over his working career. And she worked in the health industry, and so her income was a bit more stable, but obviously a fair bit lower.
Yep.
So what we sort of looked at there was they had about $410,000 combined in super, which is, as you normally about average. They actually had a slightly higher home loan than what we normally see at about $340,000. So when we talk about net retirement savings, what we're looking at there is all of their assets minus the liabilities that will be paid out in the event of their retirement. So for these guys, they had $410,000 in super, $340,000 owing on their home loan. So we said they've got net retirement savings of about $70,000. Mm-hmm. So. And the tricky one with these guys was that we really had to balance off growing their retirement savings as much as possible while also getting on top of their home loan and getting that paid down, both because obviously they want that paid out when they retire, but also because in the event of him getting made redundant or getting laid off or his income reducing or whatever might happen there. So it was a bit of that was sort of an extra something to when we looked at this. And the plan was that he wanted to retire in about 10 years' time. And I don't actually know whether he really did want to retire in 10 years' time, but it seems to be that when people don't have a clearer goal in mind, that's something that they tend to clutch onto and that we tend to work towards. And it's sort of lined up for these guys that I think he's sort of happy enough to keep working away. What they really wanted, though, was for her to be able to either retire or cut back on work earlier if possible. So they've got kids who were starting to have kids, and so she really wanted to cut back and spend more time with grandkids and help out with babysitting and childcare and all that sort of thing. So that was kind of the background of what they were looking to achieve. And I think for to me it's a fairly standard sort of thing of what we tend to see. It's a very common situation that people find themselves in at that point in time.
Yeah, certainly. It is. I've got nothing more to add. Keep
going. You sound like Charlie Munger. Nothing to add. So in that first year, so it was March, obviously, when they first came in. What we can actually do, it sort of makes it easy when we're meeting with someone with only a few months to go in the financial year, because there tends to be a lot that you can take advantage of in each financial year in terms of tax savings, all that kind of thing. So for him, what we really needed to do was use up as much salary sacrifice to superannuation. At that point in time, in March of 2016, you couldn't make personal contributions into super and then claim a tax deduction, which is what we would do now. At that point in time, it had to actually go via your payroll. So for that last 3 months of that financial year, we pretty much just shoveled all of his income straight from his employer straight into his super fund.
Yep.
Or a fair bit of it anyway.
Yeah, there would have been like 7 pays or 8 pays or something like that left over. 8 7 or 8 or 9 pays left over. So you had to really ramp up.
For that year.
To make sure that the combination of his employer money, employer contribution going in, plus his salary sacrifice, got up to around that $25,000.
That's right.
Maximum concessional limit.
So that they basically gave up about $12,000 in net income over that 3 months.
Short period of time.
And that's, if we look at the normal, I guess the levers that we pull, that was sort of the first one is those picking up those tax savings. So for him, putting a lot into super, and it's only costing them $12,000 out of pocket. Another lever that we look, if we can pull there, is we move their superannuation to a higher growth strategy. So again, while they're looking at working for another 10 years and living on at least one of their earned incomes for the next 10 years, we really looked at, can we grow this as much as possible, bearing in mind that, as we said, we've got more of a home loan that we're going to have to pay out in 10 years' time than what we might normally have. And that's something that we look at both with the growth on that superannuation and with the use of your cash flow, is that even if your goal is to pay off the home loan, sometimes the easiest way to do that is to grow your super balance as much as possible and then take a lump sum at retirement if you can, or if you need to. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm just trying to think of the podcast that we
discussed that about.
We discussed it. It was podcast 31 called Making Super Contributions.
How do you remember these numbers, mate?
I listened to it last night. It was just released last night. So I mean, go and listen to that, because that really that explains the tax savings arbitrage in there. Where just use a quick example. So if you're going to make extra repayments off your home loan, and you're doing that from before tax dollars, let's call it $10,000 of before tax dollars. If you're on a 39% tax rate, you lose $3,900 in tax. You're left with only $6,100 to pay off your mortgage. Alternatively, if you salary sacrifice that $10,000 into your superannuation fund, you don't pay income tax. You pay 15% contributions tax. But $8,500 hits your superannuation account. So there's a difference there in that what you pay off your mortgage is $6,100. What you get to use or to grow in your super fund is $8,500. So look, it's fair to say our general rule of thumb is before anyone pays, everyone is different of course, but before anyone pays an additional voluntary repayment off their mortgage, we want to maximise the amount they can salary sacrifice.
That's exactly
superannuation
right.
Every year.
And like I say, the trade-off there is, and you're right, probably better listen to that podcast about the trade-off between being able to save that money in tax versus being able to access that if you need to. The good thing was for these guys is that, and that's again a bit of a technical one, but he could actually very soon move into so we actually moved into a transition to retirement pension at that point in time. So he could actually start to draw an income back out of his pension account, out of his superannuation savings at that point in time. That's another whole different podcast.
You've got me doubting myself now. It's either podcast 31 or it's podcast 33. So it's either 31 or 33. It's called
making super contributions
versus making extra mortgage repayments or something like that.
So those were the levers that we pulled there. Was going, okay, let's use some of that income in that particularly in that first year, but then moving forward, let's take advantage of those tax savings, especially while he was on a higher income. He was paying 39% marginal tax on his top bit of income. We push that into super and pay 15%. Obviously, it's a no-brainer in that case where you can really pick up almost 25% as an immediate return. Now, the other thing that we looked at, obviously, is that they were working towards a goal of spending about $50,000 a year in retirement. And so that was $50,000 in sort of today's dollars in March of 2016. And so we'd done the numbers on, what did they need to do to be able to, what was $50,000 in today's dollars in 10 years' time, how much income would they need to draw in that first year? And how much in retirement savings would they need to be able to fund that? So basically we commenced on our merry way then. In July of 2016, we then got into the new financial year, reduced that salary sacrifice to a level that that then brought him under that limit for the next financial year.
Yep.
Same thing.
You had the full financial year's worth of
Yep.
pay runs
Yep,
to be
that's
able to
right.
spread that across.
Yep. So that continued on for sort of most of that financial year. Now, as part of these early recommendations, we'd worked out how much they had in theoretical surplus, which is not just a great racehorse name. It's actually
It's on the list of potential racehorse names.
But the concept that we'd talked about here was, so they kind of thought they would spend about $50,000 a year in retirement.
Yes.
And so what I always do here is, I said, well, let's stress test that.
Yeah.
If you think you're going to spend $50,000 a year in retirement, and these guys, they didn't want to change huge amounts in retirement, so I said, well, if you're going to spend that much in retirement, let's see if you can spend that much now.
Yes.
Given that, if you can't live on $50,000 a year now, you're probably not going to be able to live on that in retirement. And obviously that's in another whole podcast about that. But just as a rule of thumb, that tends to work really well, because what we found...
Could they do it?
No, not at all. Not even close.
I was going to say you can also substitute theoretical surplus for bullshit surplus.
Well, that's
because I mean, it all jokes aside, it's you could say it's the desired surplus as well.
Well,
people look at it and think, I don't know, subconsciously they think, in the best year we could ever have,
yes,
we
with
would
nothing ever going wrong,
but things go wrong all the time.
Yeah. And we've talked about this at length about the whole concept of a budget, is that we tend to think of it from what do I want to spend, not what will I actually spend.
Yeah. And
so a big part of this, as you see, as we move through there, was just about us readjusting our goals and being realistic about what do they want their life to look like. Because again, there's no point them torturing themselves now and trying to live this lifestyle for the next 10 years so that then they can live a different life. You know what I mean? If they're not enjoying themselves living that lifestyle now, they're probably not going to enjoy themselves retiring and living that lifestyle. So after a year of that, the theory had been that they had, there was about $20,000 spare, which we'd said they had $70,000 spare after their minimum repayments and their super contributions. And they were going to make $20,000 of that as extra mortgage repayments, and they were going to live on $50,000. That wasn't happening at all. So we'd discussed that. We'd sort of, that was the recommended amount. But a year later, I kind of went, look, guys, this isn't happening. It hasn't happened for the last year, and it's an easier conversation at that point in time, because it's not me saying I don't think you can do this.
Yes.
It's me saying you're not doing this. This is just the facts.
Yeah.
So what I said is, okay, well, let's try and what do you think is feasible? So at that point in time, we said, well, you're spending $70,000 a year. What if we try and find $10,000 per year, and you live on 60, you make $10,000 per annum as extra repayments off your mortgage. The advantage of that as well is that was the amount that they needed to pay off their mortgage to be able to have it paid off at their sort of retirement target.
Yep.
So it was kind of one where I went, that's a good bit of motivation. If they can find $10,000 per year, they'll live on 60. So it's sort of close to what they've been spending over this last 12 months. Let's see how we go with that. So that was March of 2017. 6 months later, John actually got a redundancy, as we sort of said might happen in the construction industry.
Yeah.
It's sort of a bit boom and bust in some cases. So it was swings and roundabouts for him here, because he got a redundancy and then went on to a lower paying job. So, and it was one where the redundancy he got was really fairly sizable. It was actually a net redundancy of about 120 grand. So I was actually not that worried.
Not that worried.
Like,
and
you
knew the power of dumping that off your mortgage, or
That's
dumping
exactly
it somewhere,
right.
more than makes up for, and doing it right then and there.
That's right.
More than makes up for the pay cut.
And this is what I tend to find a lot of the time with doing the calculations for clients with redundancy offers, and you'd have seen the same thing. The power of someone handing you $120,000 cash right now, compared to, and so his income dropped from, I think it was about $160,000 gross per year to about $100,000 gross per year. So you would think that that's, my income's dropped by $60,000, but on that top $60,000, there was a couple of things. He was paying 39 cents in the dollar tax.
Yeah,
so he was only getting to keep $35,000 out of that 60 anyway.
Yep.
And and not only that, it's that I think there's something about.
So there's the tax.
Yeah.
You dump that off your mortgage. You
So
save
the present value of that
$5,000 a year in interest repayments.
Exactly right.
That compounds. The other repayments that you make off your mortgage compound that out. You get it right then and there.
And the psychological thing as well is that when people go onto a lower paying job, they adjust their lifestyle.
You spend less.
You kind of in your mind, instead of going, I'm on a big income, it's all good. We can kind of
look when you break it down after you strip out the tax. Of that extra 60, and then you spread it over 26 fortnightly pays or 52 weekly pays. It's not as big as you think.
No, that's right.
So
and that's what we found. Say in that year was that you got the redundancy, got the cash, paid a lump sum off the home loan, but because he went under that lower paying job, they couldn't make concessional contributions to superannuation throughout that year. Now, what we could actually do, though, the rules had changed, so we could make personal contributions. So, in May of that financial year, what we actually did was we drew $12,000 back off their home loans, off the lump sum that they'd paid off there, put that into super for him, and claimed that as a tax deduction. So, and then for that next financial year, we restarted their salary sacrifice, and so we just adjusted it through there. So we'd still, every financial year, we'd managed to take advantage of all those tax savings that we possibly could for him, which was good. So that all ticked along for that financial year. Then we had the next major change was in May of 2019, when Jane actually cut back to 3 days per week, which had sort of been a part of the plan earlier on, was for her to cut back earlier. And so the reason she could afford to do that was that he actually got another job on higher income again. So now that's sort of squared up because she's actually cut back a bit of income. He's gone on to a higher income, so they were on about the same. The other one that was really handy at that point in time, which was because he'd reached age 60 by this point in time. There's a bit of a technical one, but if a change of employment, if you cease a gainful employment arrangement after age 60, you can actually move from superannuation into what's called an account-based pension. So for these guys, the really handy one is that the bulk of their superannuation is in his account. So the earnings on that superannuation money, so the return that they were getting on that, is getting taxed at 15%, which is the superannuation earnings tax rate. He could move that across into a pension account, even though he'd started working a week later, and pay no tax on the earnings of that.
Yeah, look, I looked at, in practical terms, I looked at the returns, the differences between the Colonial First State Wholesale Superannuation Fund versus the Colonial First State Wholesale Pension Fund last year. They were quite high returns, but the difference was a 22% return inside superannuation, the same investment strategy, just not being taxed at 15%. Turned into a 24 and a bit % return. So you actually, the power of that is you get an extra 2% rate of return for that year. What it usually pans out to be in a normal year is about 1% extra rate of return. So that's significant. So basically, if you've got
in his case, he had about $600,000 in his super account at that point.
So he had about 600 at that point in time.
So he could move that into a pension account and pick up an earnings tax saving of about $6,000 per year.
So there's about $6,000 difference in tax savings. Now that's that technicality. So that's not retired. So people actually assume you have to be retired. So meeting it, one particular condition of release for superannuation is attaining the age of 60 first. And then ending in an employment arrangement. Even if you start work with a different employer the following day, you've technically met your condition of release for superannuation in that situation. So obviously, that means you can cash out your superannuation. He didn't want to do that, of course. But what you're talking about here, Dallas, is just making a pure tax saving by moving that from super fund that's being taxed at 15% to a super fund that's being taxed at 0%.
That's right. Now, at the same time, so that was a huge tax saving, not just in that year, but every year. And that's the beauty of that earnings tax savings. That's happening. That's compounding every single year from now on. So The other one that we did, and we've talked about this, about the inheritance tax, the 17% inheritance tax on your superannuation proceeds. So for these guys, they've got adult kids. So what we said is, at the same time, what we're going to do is take a pension payment out of his account. So we basically, to keep it simple, we took $100,000 out of his pension account, recontributed that into his superannuation account, and again, I won't go into detail. You probably know this.
Look, there's another podcast.
Number.
I don't know what number it is. It's got. I'm going to say it's between 28 and 31.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Actually, if we posted, we might. We've recorded. I don't know if we have posted. But there is another podcast coming out.
Yeah.
Talking about how to minimise an inheritance tax.
Yep.
So listen to that one if you want to find out more about that.
So as part of this is kind of one of those things where, so they said, they came in for a meeting in May and sort of said, nothing too major has changed. I've got a job on a higher income. She's cutting back to a couple of days. And off the back of that sort of, they did, and it didn't seem like much had changed. There was a huge amount that we could actually do at that point in time. There was, all sorts of earnings tax savings. We picked up some income tax savings for both of them. Moving forward, we could do, because her income had dropped, we could do spouse contributions into her account, pick up a tax offset for him. We could do after-tax contributions into her account and get the government co-contribution. So just from that change, there was basically extra earnings tax savings of $6,000 per year, plus income tax savings of about $4,000 per year.
Yeah. What I'm amazed at is that in a short period of time between March 2016 and May 2019, all these changes happened to that scenario. And look, these people aren't unusual.
No.
So we find more and more, someone's working, they're both working full time. Someone gets a redundancy, they go to a lower paying job. Someone else, the same member of the couple, same couple, but the spouse moves to 3 days a week, and then another job is gained by the other spouse, and
it's a really good point, because if you look at their day-to-day life, it doesn't feel like much has changed to them.
No.
So they both, the day-to-day life, the only thing that's changed is that she's helping with grandkids 2 days a week rather than working, and he's put on a different shirt and gone to a different job. He's still in the same job. So his income has changed a bit, but he's doing the same job day to day. Behind the scenes, there's all these different things that they could take advantage of. So it was really good to have that, and this is obviously why we work with people on an ongoing basis, is that it would just be impossible to keep a track of all these different events. If you said, I've got a new job on a higher income and my wife's cutting back to 3 days a week, you would just have no idea about the opportunities that you could take advantage of.
No.
It's really, I discuss this with people all the time, where our superannuation, our retirement savings system in Australia, it shouldn't be this complicated.
No.
But it just is.
Well, what I'm laughing at is, I can't remember when it was, but the government announced one of their new reforms, simplified super. And I just laughed my head, because this result now is simplified super.
That's right.
So
I hate to say complicated.
And that was removal of reasonable benefit limits, which we definitely won't go into. I'm still I've repressed all that away for the first half of my career so far. It's amazing. It is still so complicated,
and it's really interesting with, like you say, something simple like if someone says, "When can I access my super?" Well, if your date of birth is this age, it's this age if you're fully retired. And by fully retired, I mean working less than 10 hours per week. But you can then go back to work and still be able to meet that criteria. Or if you're over age 60 and you've ceased an employment arrangement, then that's okay too. Or if you reach 65, you can still be working, but you can act. It's one of those things where it shouldn't be this complicated, that a simple question like that is so involved. And that's kind of the thing for these guys, is that there would be no way to know that. You wouldn't change your employer and go, I can then go and set up an account-based pension and draw $115,000 and recontribute some of that money as a concessional contribution and recontribute some of it as a non-concessional. It's just, it was great for us and for them, because there was all these things. they could take
Yes,
advantage of.
and look, just to digress a little bit, look, if you're listening to this and you're looking for a financial advisor, don't deal with people, the financial advisors that say they specialise in serving young people and 30-somethings and paying off debt and then retirement planning and businesses
and self-managed super fund and this
so,
and that.
So we deal only with people that are age 50 and above. Pre-retirement planning and retirement planning, we know this like the back of our hand. There is just no way known that someone, which is an oxymoron, specialising in everything.
That's right.
Can be actual specialist in those in what you're looking for. If you're listening to this podcast, we assume you're aged 50 and over.
And that's a good point. Is that, you know, as I say all the time, I'm the best in Australia at this, but I'm sure there are other people out there who are almost as good as me, but they would have to be specialising in this and doing this day in, day out to be across all these different things. So the other thing that we did at that point in time, in May 2019, was that we basically gave up pretending that they were going to spend any less than $70,000 per year.
Yes.
So the theoretical surplus of, or the theoretical budget of saying they were going to spend $50,000 a year, it got adjusted up to $60,000 per year. And then after 3 years, we went, right, let's stop kidding ourselves here.
So it was a bullshit surplus?
It was a bullshit surplus, yeah. So it was $70,000 per year, which is what they spend, which is, again, you know, we've done a whole podcast. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
And it's not, you know, the whole time we were discussing these things, when we're adjusting how much they need in retirement or how much they were going to spend, we're projecting that out and going, what does that mean for you from a work point of view? These guys weren't trying to dodge. They weren't trying to, you know, not take responsibility and pretend and want to spend more but not face up to those consequences. They're quite happy to, you know, particularly for John, he's happy to work as long as required to fund that.
Yeah.
It wasn't him saying, you know, we need to come up with some magic way. It was just about being honest and realistic about saying.
Look, it's dangerous to proceed under the false assumption. That they can spend $50,000 a year because if you proceed on that assumption, and okay, you didn't do it this year, you didn't do it the next year, you didn't do that next year, but you will do it. So we'll proceed on that assumption. That's extremely dangerous because you'll the advice that you give them is not going to be the right advice because you're proceeding under an unrealistic assumption. To the tune of about $20,000 a year.
And this is exactly for these guys where, you know, we've got a 10-year sort of working plan for them and then a 20 to 30-year retirement plan for them. If we catch this 3 years in and we go, right, those goals or those targets weren't really realistic, let's adjust that now. We're adjusting that 3 years into a 40-year, 30 or 40-year plan. It's kind of easy to make those changes then. What you can't do is keep that goal, you know, put your head in the sand and say, right, we'll retire in 10 years' time and we think we need this much because we're going to spend $50,000. And then you spend $70,000 a year for the first 10 years of your retirement and then you've run out of money because you spent more than you thought. And then you go, there's no point, you can't then at that point in time go, I actually go back to work for another 2 years.
That's right.
You know, it's too late then. So that was a part of our conversation then, was about saying, well, let's just adjust these goals and adjust what we're working towards here. So that was in the end of that financial year. So the last time we caught up was in November of 2019, which was 3.5 years or thereabouts since they'd first started. At that point in time, they now had combined superannuation balances and super and pension balances of about $728,000. So remembering that they'd started with $410,000, so that had grown by $318,000 in total. And the amounts, the net amounts that they had given up into there were a total of about $53,000. Their home loan, which remembering that was about $340,000, was now at $214,000. So they'd made, as we said, those minimum repayments off that, a little bit extra at times, but mainly the big one was that they'd paid that redundancy off there. So again, looking at their net retirement savings as their total super and pension balances minus their home loan, they now have total net retirement savings of about $514,000.
Yeah, so that's improved from $70,000 when you added the super plus when you subtracted the home loan of $340,000 from the super of $410,000 in March 16. They had a net retirement savings of $70,000. That's up to $514,000.
Exactly right.
From $70,000 over 3.5 years.
Yeah. So that's basically they're up $444,000 over that 3.5 years. Now, even adding back in everything that they've given up and all of the so adding back in the redundancy of $120,000 and adding back in the just over $50,000, $53,000 that they've given up over that time, they're still $271,000 better off just through a combination of those investment returns, their tax savings being captured within their superannuation and pension accounts. So overall, they're up $444,000. After you add back in the things that they've given up and the things that they've done there, they're still $270,000 better off over 3.5 years.
Yeah. Look, it's fantastic. And it's not like if they didn't come in to see us, they'd still be up something.
Yeah.
But nowhere near that amount. Yeah. Because
I actually did this rough calculation. They'd be up about $120,000 or $130,000.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So that's a huge difference over that period of time, over 3.5 years. So and it compounds. So that's really the first. Let's call that the first quarter.
Yeah.
The first third of their last 10 years of working life.
That's right.
So you start off with $410,000 in superannuation. All that stuff that you just went through so I'm amazed at how much has changed in their scenario.
That's right.
Over 3.5 years. So what is the next? 2/3 of that going to hold? What's the next? 6.5 years going to hold?
Yeah.
And what's really good now is that you had a launching pad of $410,000 to work with.
Yeah.
Back in March 2016, you now have a launching pad of $728,000 to work with. Just looking at their superannuation alone.
That's right, and that's the big one. The big one for these guys is that, like we said, the discussions that we've had around getting that trade-off right between living the lifestyle they want now and being realistic about the lifestyle that they want to live now and in retirement. And so, because over the last 3.5 years they've seen really good, strong, sort of probably a bit above average investment returns, plus those tax savings and things they've been able to take advantage of. As you said, the difference between having $728,000 in your superannuation and pension accounts working for you, growing, compounding over the next 6.5 years, it's a huge difference compared to that. We're constantly blown away by the difference between. It seems magic, the difference between having a little bit extra at the start and the effect of that over 5, 6, 7 years. So that's really the thing for them, is that I guess, who knows what the future will hold. Obviously things will change over the next 6.5 years and beyond for these guys, but they're now in a position where, which is kind of already what's happening with Jane cutting back a bit on work, is that they've really added a lot onto that foundation, and so now their money's doing a lot more of the work for them. So it's not necessarily as much about us really trying to grind our way out and try and find huge amounts of net income to put into super and all that kind of thing.
Yes. It's
really about us just fine-tuning, picking up every dollar of tax saving we can, working those super and pension account balances as hard as possible, and just letting that work along and compound in the background, and just adjusting our goals and adjusting our targets as we go along.
Yeah, look, without overcomplicating things, it's fair to say that they've taken advantage of everything they can take advantage of over the last 3.5 years from a personal point of view. So harnessing their income. From a legislation point of view. So tax is a huge one there. So the tax dollars that you've saved them really has just been trapped in their superannuation fund, and there's been return on that as well. And also from an economic point of view, by working their money harder, let's call that. So the money that they actually had in there. Obviously, along the way as well, a change in job for John after 60 meant that you could ramp up the tax savings by a bit of a paperwork shuffle. And that's something that people miss out on all the time, because they wouldn't know about that. And look, there's a lot of financial advisors out there that don't know about that, because they try to work with people of all ages, whereas we concentrate only on people that are age 50 and over, so we know that like the back of our hand. So you've got all of those things there, just humming along perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's the sum of all those parts that's put them in that position.
And that's probably what I'd wrap up with for these guys, I guess, in terms of moving forward. As much as we talk about retirement targets and goals and the rest of it, the reality is for these guys, like John in particular, I don't think has a specific end in mind of I really want to be retired by this age, or I want to do. So really, the big part for these guys and for most of their clients is they really just want to make sure they're taking advantage of everything we can.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're alluding to there, is that whether that means he works for another 5 years or 6 years or 7 years or whatever he sort of wants to do, has to do at that point in time, he's kind of, obviously again with his work, because it will probably be variable, his income, he knows that he can't control all those things.
Yeah.
And he's kind of happy for that to be a bit up in the air.
Yep.
As long as throughout every year that we're looking at we're constantly looking at this and taking advantage of everything that we can. So we know that the position that they end up in 5, 6, 7 years time, that's the best position they could have possibly ended up in. And that's, I think, a bit of peace of mind for most people, is to go, whatever happens, we know that there's nothing that we could have done to change this.
Yeah, great note to wrap up on. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Lighthouse Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.